Hey Jan, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you, Ahmed.
Thank you for coming. So I'm very excited for this episode because you have a track record of building research infrastructure, incubating strategic research partnership, which is a great combination for cross-disciplinary collaborations. Are you ready to dive in?
I'm absolutely ready. Let's do it.
All right. So you are from a village called Edi in Norway, northwestern Norway.
Yep.
Growing up, how was Jan, and what was Edi influence on you?
Well, it's an interesting story because I grew up on a small dairy farm. So that farm life was what I knew, and farm life meant you were also a helping hand from day one, but you also want to try to play and be that. And so the balancing schooling with which was an expected thing in a family with doing the farm chores as needed to do, and then being a little bit a boy and teenager and rambunctious and do things that we probably shouldn't be doing. So all of those things that you do when you grow up. So, but having to grow up on a on a small actually dairy farm, that actually came with some constraints in what you could do and could achieve.
By constraint, you mean like if you was tasked with a task, you had to do the task, right?
Yeah, we have to do, but more so. I mean, growing up on a dairy farm, pretty much anywhere in the world, that's not a rich man's life.
Yeah.
So it also comes with constraints, sort of financially, what you, as a child growing up, with your family sort of income and what that looked like. And so there was limitations of that. We didn't have the newest bike in town, we didn't have the newest whatever, but also in terms of what you needed to do. And so when because we were part of the labor force of the farm, if you're better or worse, that's what we were, and we were raised respecting sort of the ground we lived on, and we had to just step up and do things. And if we couldn't do something, my grandfather or my father and mom would look at me and says, you're here to help us, that. And so instead of playing, we would have to help in the fields and in the barn. And if we didn't know how to do something, we would sort of not just kind of futz around. We would ask, show me, and then I can do. So you had to step up every time. It was no excuse just to kind of stare in the blind and not do things and try to do it. If you didn't know how to do it, ask for help, and help will be given in an instructional, cordial way, and then you would move on and get it done.
So basically, you're encouraged to ask questions, and if you don't know, they will teach you.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I think that sometimes I find that people hesitate asking questions. I think I was raised realizing that I won't know everything. And my elders, my parents and my grandparents, we knew that they knew a lot of things. And then sometimes we were, as children, were able to bring new ideas of how to maybe do something that maybe even taught them something. But you had to open the door for conversation. And part of that is asking questions like, how do I fix the tractor? How do I fix the plow? How do I get this attached? And if we didn't know it, they would teach us. And then next time you're expected to know.
That is awesome. Now, this is like a generalist job where you had to do a lot of different
Yep.
works in the farm, right? From milking cows or from hay or from tractors, right?
Yep.
But your dad was worked another job in the textile industry, which is more specific
Yep.
to detailing, meaning cutting the garment and stitching the pieces together.
Yep.
Between being a journalist in a farm, and I'm sure you went with your dad a couple of times to his other job, how these two end of the, we'll say, being a journalist and being really in the nitty gritty, trying to put pieces together, I see the resemblance with your job later on in life, where you were at the Kennedy Institute and you had this big institution and you needed to put the pieces together. So is there like a connection there?
Oh, I think there's absolutely it. It's a little bit about, being a generalist doesn't mean that you're not an expert in anything, but it means that you're adaptable to the things that are in front of you. And sometimes it is about learning a trade and a skill. And my parents, both my mom and dad, actually worked in the textile industry for a while because as a farmer, a farming income wasn't enough to support a family of four boys and my parents. So they needed to learn those skills, and it's basically a skill you learn. And I think that being able to leverage that and play with that, but then also always, as I said earlier, I was always fascinated by, I didn't always like school, but I knew it was important because my parents didn't go to more than, I think, 7th or 8th grade schooling. But they always made schooling a very important part of what we needed to do. There was an expectations that we would do well in school. They also applauded us for effort. Because you're supposed to do well, but we also realize it's hard. And so I didn't always love all my subjects in school, but that again, it's one of those I can learn this. I can take what I know, what I'm good at, and I can apply it here, and I can learn that. And I think that was instilled in me at an early age to kind of do that. And sometimes that meant working together with others. And that's part of the thing that I took forward. I think it's it's not just about me doing things. I have to actually somehow figure out how I get other people to be excited about it or collaborate and work together. So it gets back to the cross-disciplinary collaboration that you talked about in the opening. How do you make that happen? And I think it goes back to even the days when I worked on a farm.
This is a good example of how there is an argument saying people are born with leadership and leadership is a skill to develop. It's very obvious. I am with the second opinion. It's very obvious that what you did taught you leadership by doing, meaning getting people to collaborate, seeing both ends of the spectrum, being in a farm, which is life is different than being in a city. Yeah. But I'll get back to this point later on. But I want to touch on. So you played cross country skiing.
Yeah.
In the winter.
Yeah.
And in the summer you did track field.
Yeah.
And you were a runner. It is very common to see people who are successful in life have a sports they played when they were young. That gives them stamina. But you did more. You traveled at age 12 to do sports all over the country.
Yeah.
Thinking back about this, what's your perspective of did sport play an important role in your life, and what was it?
Well, I think for me it did, in two critical ways. First of all, my dad was a soccer player. I realized very early on that soccer was not for me, and he realized it. Our parents realized it, and we grew up in Norway, so cross-country skiing in the wintertime was absolutely something that was done. And while in my younger age, I wasn't particularly good because relative to my height, I was somewhat overweight. But as I grew a little bit older, it became something that fascinated me. But then also I started picking up my pace as I lost some weight too in running and track and field. So I became very fascinated by this, and that was probably my favorite sport. And it offered me opportunities to travel to track meets outside Ada, outside the county, outside sort of the state, if you will, the equivalent of a state here. To explore that. And that meant that my parents had 1 and 2 jobs. They were farmers and they worked in the textile industry. They couldn't go with me on a weekend all the time. So there was always a group of people you traveled with and you went to these places. That afforded me the opportunity to gain some independence. I had to take care of myself.
Way early.
I had to take care of myself. And in some cases it just started at the 12, but maybe probably more 14, 15, 16 years of age. I still had to take care of that. That means I had to figure out how to, pack my bag, have my sleeping bag with me, be ready, be on time, kind of do all those things that maybe often parents almost overdo to help you with. Yeah. And that independence, I think, has sort of taken me where I am today, where I do appreciate and I understand the challenges, and I'm trying to applaud that on my children and our children, that they also have that independence. And so I think that's an important skill to have.
Absolutely. And transferring that knowledge to your kids, do you feel like sometimes you're telling them too much not to learn by themselves? How do you balance, hey, I want you to start where I ended?
Yeah.
Or it's like coaching? How do you do that?
I think this is maybe, for my wife and I, maybe one of the most frustrating things for us, because we both think about the way we grew up in Norway and how free we were as children to just kind of roam and play and just be independent. And we left in the morning, went to school. Sometimes the way home from school, while it may actually be just a mile or two, it could be a 2-hour journey where we explored the neighborhood. And today, I think we are a little bit too worried about that. I think as a parent, we kind of almost are overprotective, so you don't allow children often to explore that freedom. And I think that I benefited from it. So how do you find an alternative to the replacement? So you almost have to try to seek that out and figure out where can you let go. Because if you don't let go, you're not learning some of those skills. And I'm not sure if we figured it out. I see our kids, young adults now, they landed on their feet and they're doing well and they don't live at home. So I'm happy maybe. And I think they eventually thank you for whatever you did, but it's not clear there's a recipe.
There is no recipe.
There's no recipe.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
there is no recipe. Generations times are different too. So our days are different. Our grandparents' days are different.
Yep.
But the idea here is to be there when you need them.
Exactly, and that's hard sometimes because there's the phrase of helicopter parenting, and that actually is it's good to protect them, but they have to sometimes make mistakes. And I think the greatest learning happens when you make mistakes. You just want to make sure that that's not a life-threatening mistake.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a great saying that says, in school, you go to school, you study, you take an exam, you pass and fail.
Yeah.
In life, you fail, you learn the lesson, and you fail some more.
Exactly.
This is bring me to a point is, so you were at AD, and you were in the farm, and you were going to school. It would be easier for young Jan to say, I'm going to take over this farm, and life is simple.
Yep.
What sparked the idea of you going to college? Was it something that happens in high school? Was it a teacher?
Yep.
What was it?
So a couple of things that are worth noting. So in Norway, when I grew up, the tradition on any farm was that the oldest son was going to inherit the farm.
Okay.
And I had an older brother.
Okay.
And he was in line to inherit. He was not sure if he was going to take it. In the end, he decided that he was going to inherit the farm. So it made it easy. But I was always playing plan B, where college was going to be. So that's why I went to high school, which is actually not a mandatory part of the studies in Norway. So I went to high school doing sort of the college prep track. It's a 3-year. And I have to say that if I'm going to point to somebody that truly inspired me, it is Knut Reidar Sande. He was my math professor, and I every time I'm back in Norway, I said I need to go and visit him because I need to thank him. And if he hears this, I hope he hears me because I'm really indebted to him and what he inspired in me, because I think that's why I fell in love with math, and math took me to where I am today in my applied math, electrical engineering, and all of that, because he made math fun, exciting, and mysteriously and challenging, all of these things, and he made it seem so easy. I wanted to be that skilled in it. So he really inspired me, and it's I often say, no, I need to go and find him, and I'm hoping he's out there and hears this. So that would be my wish.
That is great. This is a thank you to all the professors and all our teachers when we were young, telling them what you guys do matters.
Yep.
And infusing different strategies and different methodologies in teaching and making it fun makes people who change their world like you.
Exactly. And so I said, he was I have had a lot of, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of mentors and sponsors, my parents, my grandparents, even my siblings, and friends. But he was one that I really looked up to, and he was sort of a role model that got me set. I mean, he got me excited about what I'm doing. I ended up sort of following through that. I didn't become a mathematician like he did, but I became somebody that was working inspired by math.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now it's early 1980s. You finish high school and you take a year off to join the military service.
Yep.
You already have strong work ethic, stamina from sports. How did the military service shape Jan, and how did it hone your skills?
Yeah. So in Norway, just for everybody that listen, military service is compulsory. Back when I was growing up, if you were a boy, today actually girls too, it was a compulsory 1-year military service.
You have to do it.
Yeah. So everybody had to do it. And so unless you had a health condition, you had to serve 1 year in the military. And I served in the Army. You can serve in Army, Navy, Air Force, different services. I served in the Army. And I approached that from the following, if something is compulsory, there's a tendency to not want to do it. It's like, no, you can't force me to do this. But I said, well, I have to do this. Military something. Let me make the best of it.
Yeah.
Let me look at every opportunity for me to grow as a leader, even though I may not have used those terms and thought about it. But I wanted to learn something and get the max benefit out of it. And I said, I want to approach this not because, I don't want to be here. I want to approach this, what can I learn from this? And, I had no ambitions of a career in the military. However, I said this is leadership learning. I can learn that, and if you think about being in the military, it's all about leadership. It's all about followers. It's all about solving problems as a team, because individuals can't solve a problem like that. So I was inspired by that, and so I approached every exercise, every drill, everything we did with the intent that, yep, this is good for me because I'm growing every day. So it's part of that independence. And I saw my colleagues when I was in the service struggling because they were almost conditioned to not want to like it. And I think that by me approaching it from wanting that, no, I'm going to learn from this, it's going to something I'm going to take with me, even though I'm not going to be in the services after I'm done with the year. It helped me tremendously. So I'm looking back at my year in the military as a year of tremendous growth and leadership, because I did got the opportunity to actually be a corporal, which allowed me, because of I also had then ambitions of learning the max. I stepped up when opportunity came. I was offered opportunity, so that also meant that I did get to lead a group of people. So I actually stepped into that. So if you have an opportunity, don't let it run away from you.
Yeah.
Step into it, grab it, and if you don't master it at first, find people that are mentors and supporters that can help you grow into it.
This is something that came in one of the episodes. You reframed the idea of going to the military. Instead of you have to go, you reframed it to, I am here, how can I get the best of it?
Yep.
And you remind me of Tom Coltz. One of the episodes we had him, he's the Door Institute director for new leaders. Yeah. He talked about the service in the military. It is from the inside out.
Yep.
You're there, the salary is not great. You're there to protect your colleagues. You're there to, the feeling comes from the inside out. And I can see that in your leadership at the ION. I don't remember, was it last week? I came across you saying hello to everybody from the outside in, small or folks who are later in their careers. You just say hi to everybody.
Yep.
You network, and it comes from the inside because there's a huge task for the ION to transform Houston economy.
Yep.
And you can see, looking back at your career, you can connect the dots somehow.
Yeah. Well, I always think the glass is half full, almost to my fault. A lot of people look at the glass as half empty. I took the military's half full. It's for me to fill it, not to empty it. Wow. Because I want to grow with that. And I think that sort of served me well. And in many times afterwards, and I've thought about those things, it's like I said, I have my math professors, I have a military service. And during my military service, I actually, pre-military, I applied to go to college, and I wanted to be a chemical engineer. Military service, I changed my mind. I wanted to be an electrical engineer. And I applied to the same college, got admitted, to go on to be an electrical engineer. And so to me, it was transformative. Not the military, but the fact that I grew up and I changed my mind, and that's okay.
So earlier I was sitting on the hall, and there was a magazine. It was Life magazine, edition 1966, July 1st. And it has in the topic it says, Texas is different, and it has, this is how the moon color looks like. This is a good entry to my question, which is, growing up in the 1960s and early 1970s, era filled with a lot of events. Yep. From placing a man in the moon, black and white TV, oil crisis, in the world where, in Norway specifically, people were not allowed even to drive.
Yep.
So, oil crisis, finding oil to Norway in 1969. There's many ties to Houston for you growing up. From JFK's speech in Rice about the moonshot to coming to Rice, thinking back at those events now, how was the experience living these events back in the day?
Well, so this is really going back to me being a kid, and I have to say that we got a TV. We had one TV in a two-family household. It was black and white, as you pointed out, but we were glued to it, listening to the whole moon, the rocket launches and whatnot, and the landing on the moon. This was world news. This made it to a small little dairy farm village in Norway, in Ede, and it was fascinating. Did I have a concept of where Houston was at the time? Probably not. I'm going to venture to say no. So to some degree, it's almost serendipitous, thinking about the experience with the family, listening to somewhat the sparkly noise on the TV, talking about the landing on the moon and all of that, and me now being in Houston or selecting to come to Texas to study. I mean, there's some sort of no correlation to some degree, and yet here I am. And I'm sure many others could have said that they didn't come to Texas, but I came here, and I've loved it ever since. And I consider this home. I mean, this is to me home. But those were times of challenges because, yes, you're right, the oil embargo in the mid-'70s, there were weekends where families were said, you cannot drive this weekend on the week because there is a short supply of gasoline, and we need to preserve it for the life-threatening transportation and for transportation and for the people going to work during the week.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stressors in that time. I was an outside observer because I was a young child at the time. But it happened, and it made for wonderful opportunity for us as children to build basically fleets with sails on them, with skates on them, and run down the freeway in front of us.
So you made an opportunity out of the
We
crisis.
made an opportunity out of it, and we could roam the street where the cars normally were.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A funny thing about this, I was in Norway House 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and there was a Norwegian. He was an astronaut, I believe, but he was a reporter too.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away 3 years ago.
Tonberg.
Yes. I couldn't pronounce his name.
Yeah. Tonberg.
So, did you knew of him before? Or
I knew his voice from my childhood because he was. So there was 2 people in Norway that was sort of picked from the national broadcasting, to basically report. And one got sent to NASA JSC and reported from there. And Tonberg was the one that remained basically in Norway, being sort of the conduit to it. And so he was an icon in Norway. And when we heard him speak, and he's been in Houston many times, during his lifetime. But he was the voice. I would have known his voice. Even if I didn't see him. I did not realize how tall he was before I got a photo next to him. But he was really tall too. So,
that is great.
But he was also tall by stature in the form of what he represented. He represented that curiosity and the future of what we could be. I mean, exploration.
Yeah.
And if you think about exploration in the 60s, we also explored the subsurface, and we did find oil. Or Phillips Petroleum found oil on the continental shelf of Norway, which was another big thing for us. So moon landing through that and finding oils, those were big moments in history.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So transitioning to my next question. So you have been a Texan for over 32 years.
Yeah.
How do you explain the relationship between having 2 homes with all the differences it has, and what positive impact it had on you and your family?
So it's kind of funny because, as I mentioned earlier, my wife is also Norwegian, and our kids are born here, but we are dual citizens, and they are raised most of their time here. When we go to Norway, we travel home. When we come back from Norway to Houston, we travel home. We're going home both ways.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, but and so maybe home is where you are. Home is where your family is, meaning the nucleus family. And so that's what I think it is. But I feel like I'm living the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
Because I do have the opportunity to take advantage of the incredible opportunities that I've been offered to work on here in Houston through my working at Rice University for a long time, and now here at ION, and also all the incredible people I get to meet with here in Houston. The amazing city that Houston is hard to explain to people that somehow have an image of Houston that was actually grown back in the 40s and 50s, and actually really taking that. And that's what we fell in love with, is this incredible Houston that I would love for more people to recognize. We're not going to be a tourist destination in the sense of that, but we are so much more than that. And that, I think, is why we came back, because we did leave, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we did leave, but we came back again. And when we left, we thought, oh, yeah, maybe we won't live in Norway. But if we come back, we'll go somewhere else in the U.S. U.S. is 50 states. There's plenty of territory we can explore. We came back to Texas. love Tex-Mex, I love margaritas, I love the people, I love the culture. I mean, it's hard not to love. If you allow Houston in, if you allow it in, it'll be amazing to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Houston is one of the most diverse city in the nation.
Yep.
And coming to that, I was thinking about this when I was driving to here. As I speak Arabic, you speak Norwegian, and here we are talking in a third language, right? So I'm sure there's some misunderstanding along the way, but what my point is, diversity is very important.
Yep.
And it plays a huge role in the innovation ecosystem here
Yep.
and out there. How do you tell employers or companies who are not diverse enough why diversity is important?
Well, I think there's been a lot of, we've always talked about diversity, the importance of doing it. I think we haven't been good at doing diversity. Now, I have the mild handicap that I grew up in a very homogeneous country, and I don't think that, I think a lot of Europe is struggling with how to do integration and multicultural, and so there, to some degree, the U.S. has an advantage because we've been at it much longer.
Yeah.
But I do think that the thing that I keep going back to is that I look around and there's not even statistics. Half the population are females, roughly half.
Yeah.
And then we have black and brown, and we have Asians and whatnot. If we don't tap into all talent we have, we're not going to succeed.
We're missing
and
out.
and we're missing out because being a white person, I don't have a monopoly on the best ideas or the ability to do something, and so we need to create opportunities for all of them. And I think that while this has been sort of a narrative for a long time that we have to do it, I think we're finally waking up to the fact that if we're going to be competitive as a city, as a nation, as a civilization, we got to make sure that everybody is doing well. And if my neighbor is not doing well, I ultimately will not do well. So it is in my best interest to make sure that the people around me, because as a child, I remember while working with my children, we used to, stack Legos. And it was Duplos in the earlier day. And often it was about stacking a tall tower. Who could stack the tallest set of Duplos?
Yeah.
And invariably, we will stack one on top of the other and see which one fell over first, And then you start having to teach them, it's like, well, if you're going to stack a pyramid, make it wide at the base so it can stand. And if everybody is suffering, and not doing well, if the people next to you is not doing well, you cannot build something big. So we have to lift everybody. So you cannot achieve the bigger thing unless the people around you also is part of it. So you have to think about that. How does that become part of your Does that mean we get it right every time? Probably not.
Yeah.
But we constantly have to keep trying.
Working on it.
And we have to be honest about this is not easy, it's hard, and we need to do better every day.
I walking in the Ion, going to the events on Friday, I see a lot of different demographies, and I think you guys have done a great job. But something you mentioned about everybody should be elevated.
Yeah.
So it brings me to my next question. So with capitalism, there's a focus on the person and value in terms of dollar, right? In Norway, taxation is high, but there's a balanced aspect of good for all.
Yeah.
With mineral rights are public good, Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is one of the few examples of that. Living in both countries, innovation is in the core of economic growth. How do you see both models, pros and cons? Norway has been very successful, although it's considered in the middle. It's not very capitalistic, and it's not right. And the U.S., same thing, have been successful in innovation. What's pros and cons of seeing these two different aspects?
Well, I think you need to figure out the balance, and I think that the balance is the key part. I mean, the balance is about it. You also have to create incentives for people to take risk.
Yeah.
So in an entrepreneurial way, what's the incentive for me to take more risk? So, and then you also have to look at, like, you need to also have, what am I, if I'm sort of growing, where am I striving for? What's the next thing I need to do? So I think there's a healthy imbalance you need to maintain, but then there is the unhealthy imbalance that I think we're starting to land at, where there's such a small percentage of the population here in the U.S. that owns most of the wealth. and that now we are in an unhealthy balance because if the middle class is literally gone, if the middle class is gone, what does that look like? U.S. was built on the middle class.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of the challenge we're up against here. And I think that probably most of Europe, including Norway, has probably been somewhat better of maintaining sort of that opportunities in the middle class. Am I optimistic that sometimes, you tend to gravitate towards the worst.
Yeah.
You adopt the things that and so is Norway and is Europe on the track to be more like the U.S.? Sometimes I fear that's what it is. And so I wish I had a glass ball that I could look into and gaze into and say, here's the future, here's what it's going to look like. And I don't know. I'm hopeful that we will realize that we need to help. Everybody needs to help their neighbor, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if my neighbors is not inspired to go to school, then we have a problem.
Yes.
How can we help them make that happen?
I think earlier this morning I was reading an article on LinkedIn with all the layoffs happening in Twitter.
Yeah.
Somebody posted on LinkedIn, a friend of mine said, we all rise by helping others. And this is so true.
Yeah.
Going to my next question, in the mid-1980s, you moved to the U.S., studied at Texas A&M, then Rice University. How was college life back then?
It was interesting because it was certainly a big transformation from coming from Norway. Because Norway, first of all, there's no tuition. I pay for my textbooks and my living. College life was pretty relaxed and laid back, and I'm getting here, and I feel, in one sense, I'm almost back in middle school. Because in Norway, if I had 3 courses to take one semester, I took the 3 courses. I had one final exam. I had no test, no homework, no nothing. It was all on me to succeed. I come here, and I have weekly assignment, daily assignment. I have quizzes and pop quizzes. And it's like, whoa, what happened here? I'm an adult. Why are you treating me this way? So it's kind of an interesting transition, actually, because I literally had only 2 more semesters to take to get my bachelor's at A&M. And, when I came from Norway, so I transferred all my credits. And so this was an interesting, but then you realize it continued, the same way of teaching and structuring continued through your PhD. The classes you took were structured the same way. You do quizzes and homework and whatnot. And I have to admit that looking back at it, I think it is a healthy thing. I think that practice and drilling and that thing actually is something most people don't do on their own. So having assignments that somehow give you this. So in retrospect, it was a good thing. It was hard to get used to, I have to admit. That was a tough cookie. But culturally, I mean, we had adopted pretty well, and we enjoyed it. We did well in school, which made it easier. And Texas, and back then in the beginning, living in College Station was a very forgiving environment from a point of view of it being sort of small. Although it was 35,000 students, we came from a place that probably had 800 students, so it was a little bit of a scale difference. But you found your way, and you discovered it, and you had a few friends, and you kind of fit in, and it was all about what you were studying. So it is an interesting sort of journey, I have to admit, but we loved it, and obviously we stayed, so it couldn't be that bad.
Have you ever thought of this, like you coming here and staying and feeling like, okay, I never thought I would be here?
Oh, absolutely. Many times. I thought we came over here, so I followed my wife. She was a year ahead of me, so I followed then girlfriend, now my wife, when I came here. And I mean, if you ask me down at the bar, I'll tell you that she's the reason I'm here, because I was blind in love, so I followed her. And then somehow I was the one that kept going to school and staying here. But our intent was always for this to be a quick trip to Texas, study, get our degrees, and then move back home and work, and that was it. But Texas grew very quickly on us. So my wife got a job in Houston, and then I decided that I'm going to apply to get my PhD at Rice University. I was admitted, and I did that. And then sort of one year led to another, and before we knew it, we had been in Texas almost 15 years. And at that point, it's like, this is home. This is where I have. This is the formative part of my years that I really have lived in this culture. And I think that really set in. And maybe it was a little bit, and then we said, no, but we didn't come here to stay here. So that's when we decided to move back to Norway, and I took a faculty position at the University of Stavanger. And it was to some degree to satisfy this nagging feeling that this is not what we planned. We had planned to come and study and then go back home. But then we said, but maybe that's not the right thing to do, but we were not willing to admit that before we had moved back home to make the decision that we were become American, if you will.
This hits a chord with a saying. Says expats come to a different country and leave everything behind, including family, culture, language, and coming to a different country, and you had to start from scratch. I don't want to paint a pink picture for the audience, but I want you to talk about the hard stuff too. How, thinking about you saying you had to go back to prove actually this was not a choice by coincidence, right? During this, if you think about it, it was hard.
Well, it was hard. I mean, it was hard to come here because you're having to adopt a new culture. But I always approach that from the following perspective. I chose to come here to the U.S. It's me that needs to adopt to this environment. I'm not asking this environment to adopt to me. I need to integrate into this environment. So I looked at opportunities that was offered through me studying here. It's like, how do I adjust to here? I'm not taking Norway with me. I need to be part of this ecosystem. I didn't want to be a Norwegian in Texas. I wanted to become a Texan, if you will. My accent will never come over, but that's okay. But so that was an important part. And I think with going in with that mindset, it's almost like that military. Going on with that mindset, I was sort of conditioning myself that this is going to be successful. Because and if it wasn't, I would know why, because I realized that I don't like that, what I have to become to adopt to this. But I said, being a Norwegian Lutheran here in Texas is not what I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody that felt like this was home and people treated me like this was where I was from. So that was an important part for what. Then moving back to Norway was to some degree just that I needed to sort of either validate that this was actually where I was going to live. Now, we did move back home, committed to live in Norway. That was always, so it was not just like, oh, let's do this quick experiment. No. And as a matter of fact, we had friends telling us, if you live this here long, you have to commit to yourself to be more than 1 year back in Norway before you change your mind. So we committed to ourselves that we're not going to have any thinking about leaving Norway again before 2 years had gone. And then when 2 years was up, almost to the anniversary, I talked to somebody about coming back.
We'll come to that point. So it is summer 1999. You have 2 kids. You decided to get some experience. And just want to get back to, before you go back to Norway, the job market was tough at that time. So there were so many talents competing for limited jobs. So you applied for Rice PhD, right? So as a research fellow, after your PhD, you worked to help others to be successful at what they do. So during their research, so this is a great example of how PhD is not limited to academia. I am really interested on how did you choose that job? And, with the experience in the University of Stavanger and come back to the U.S. to work at Rice have been very fulfilling to the notion that, okay, I am doing this now. It goes back to inner, right? Helping others. How was that experience?
So a little bit for the readers here. So my journey was, and I really like that question, because my journey was really all about, we wanted to crunch that need, like, are we Norwegian living in Norway, or are we going to come back here to something, And so that was one thing. But the second thing I needed to do for myself, I had pursued a PhD. I was working after my PhD in sort of a research engineer postdoc position at Rice. So I got sort of into sort of academic environment. I said, well, if I'm going to pursue academia, the thing I should be doing is a faculty position. So when we decided to move to Norway, I applied to a faculty position. I got a faculty position at the University of Stavanger. And that's where I landed. And I had great fun doing that. I absolutely love teaching. I got to teach my favorite subjects, which included, part of it was math. And then, but then I very early on realized that sort of the the chirping in the air was like, yeah, but you also you want to lead something, you want to manage, you want to help grow something. And if you're a researcher, faculty member, it's all about sort of your own little world. And I saw the world much bigger than me. And I said, I'm a good sort of leader in terms of creating opportunities. So when I did get the opportunity to come back to RISE, it was actually not in a faculty position role, but it was in an research institute, which is now called the Ken Kennedy Institute for Information Technology, that really was about how do I create alliances and teams and cross-disciplinary opportunity, and how do I create research infrastructure to support all the incredible research that these brilliant minds can do. So I was much more about, again, creating that leadership and allowing that to grow and happen. So it was really a conscious decision on my part to sort of decided, and a little bit of discovery. It's like, I'm not cut to be a faculty member. That's not what I'm good at. I'm good at helping others be very much more successful. So how do I use my skills to help others be successful? That could be through building infrastructure, research infrastructure. It could be through building teams that go after and get funding and to do research. But I always just helped them write the proposal, and I got out of the way. So that was sort of what so it was a very conscious decision. Like, being a faculty member is not right for me. So that experience, that was part of the experiment moving to Norway. So it was a decision, conscious decision. I could have decided that's what I want to do, come back and apply in Houston for a faculty position. But I decided to pursue sort of a non-faculty position that allowed me to work with hundreds of brilliant people.
This is awesome in terms of you being able to work with different people, different ideas, and being aware of what research is at that time and current. This is a good transition to my next question, which is, so now you're back at Rice. You had the call-off in 2 years mark. You come to Ken Kennedy Institute. So what does the Ken Kennedy Institute do? And how did your work as a research fellow and faculty member in Norway help in bridging the next move in your career, which is to the ION?
No, I mean, so first of all, the Ken Kennedy Institute is all about, it's a service institute for faculty. I mean, initially it was a very inward-looking institute, and there's nothing bad about that. It's about, there's 100 faculty members at Rice that are members of the institute. They're not employees of the institute, and we as an institute were there to help them be more successful in creating cross-disciplinary teams, creating the infrastructure. So we were trying to make sure that they were even more successful in what they were doing. So we were a service institute. We were a service provider. That meant from writing grant proposals with them. They wrote the intellectual part. We helped them with sort of the structure and the budget and all of that. And then as soon as they got funded, get out of the way. Or we built large supercomputing infrastructure that then they could use, and then we partnered with them to justify why we should be able to get the grant and do that. The other piece we did a lot of, and the Institute do a lot of still, is working with industry in town. We have tremendous industry. The oil and gas industry, one of the biggest computing consumers around for doing imaging. And so we had a long partnership and relationship with them, and they still do with the Institute, to kind of say, what's that pipeline of talent? What's that? So we help work all of those. So that, but what led to that was really being sort of a postdoc researcher.
Research fellow,
research fellow at Rice. Then being a faculty member and understanding what it meant to be a faculty member, because in Norway I was a faculty member. I actually was a department chair also. I understood how to manage and be a faculty member and all of that. And coming back, I worked with faculty, so I understood the faculty member. They understood me. We had sort of a shared language, if you will. I was not a faculty member, but all the people I worked with treated me like I was, because they knew I had lived that and understood what that meant and what was, So that afforded me that opportunity. So the combination of the two was really powerful in what I was, what we were successful to do. And I have to call out my boss at the time, Moshe Vardi, and he's a still dear friend, and he was a great mentor and supporter, and really gave me the opportunities to also grow in that position. Because, one of the things I did ask for when I come back, how much autonomy will I have in this position for those things that I think is important? And we had a long discussion about that, and it's to some degree, I had to prove to him that I could deliver value that was aligned with what he, as a faculty director, also wanted. So did I understand my boss and can work with my boss on the terms without being told what to do. So that's also a sort of a skill. It's like, it's like, and there's nothing demeaning about sort of earning that trust with somebody. You kind of have to say, well, I can do this, I can do this. So you get drips of things you get to do, and at some point you're equals.
So this is a very an interesting area where people going to a new job think about is how much autonomy do you have?
Yeah.
Because it's your knowledge on the line to build something by your own. So how much autonomy did they give you, and what was expected from you?
No, I mean, I think that's exactly, you had to kind of, to some degree, everybody has a vision for something, and you have to realize that everybody reports to somebody else.
Yes.
So you have to put that at the ground level. And at some point, if my alignment is not aligned to my superior, then I'm not going to earn that trust of the autonomy. So I think that's kind of, it's a play together, and if people work well together, it really does amplify each other. And it is, it's one of those things that, in the first year, did I do a lot sort of solo? No. In my 18th year, we were equals.
So coming back to tailoring things and putting the pieces together, I feel like the first year, it's like being in the farm.
Yep.
Learning the bits and pieces and asking for help.
Yep.
And creating relationships.
Yep.
So there is always fear. If I go to another job, what's the expectation? Am I going to do right? So you had some fears, right?
Oh, of course you have. There's some intimidation.
Yeah.
But I do think that the analogy you're using is perfect. Because the fear is that you won't fit and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you got to basically be humble about it, and this could be in the terms of you joining a new position, but you also happens if you get a new boss.
Yeah.
You may not change your job, but your boss may change. So you have to kind of reestablish that credential and that relationship of alignment, because the mission is driven by the people that you report to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you don't want to micromanage anybody.
No, of course not.
Because then you're not tapping into the full power of the organization. But it takes some time to get the right alignment between them.
So it's back to balance.
Exactly, back to balance, exactly.
During my time at Rice, at the Baker Institute, we had Bobby Tudor come in and give us a lecture for the MECON program, Energy Economics. And I asked him, so he works at Goldman Sachs, and he's a very successful investor in the energy space. I asked him a question about mentors and sponsors, and he told me the story about how a sponsor at his work actually helped him to be where he is at Goldman Sachs. So my next question is, I didn't even know what a sponsor is until that time, and I was, 34? So mentors versus sponsors, are they important? And how did it impact your career? And do you still have mentors today?
I mean, I think they're fundamental. We may call them, and we may not have thought about them in those terms.
Yeah.
But if you look at your life and you think back about who has influenced you in some way, that's just a label. So absolutely, I think sponsors are the ones that to some degree take you under their wing, and they help really actively grow you. They're sort of a trusted partner. It's almost like your parents are your sponsors. And a mentor is maybe somebody that you're very comfortable having an open conversation with about thing. And mentorship can always sometimes almost work both ways. So I think that it's critically important to have people in your journey. And if I think about Moshe Vardi, I think about him as a great sponsor, but he was also my boss, and also as a mentor. I think he fills both roles for that. Other people like Keith Cooper is another one. I look at Reggie DeRoche, our president at Rice University. I look at him as a great mentor also, because I can sit down with him and have a conversation, and I learn something. I can ask him questions, and I can get a response to that about the deep thinking, leaning into his experience that could benefit me, so I can help him and the organization or ION or Houston in some way.
There's a good memory with President DeRoche when I was in the executive committee for Roundtable Young Professionals at the Baker Institute, and I remember one of my friends. She said, "I am very excited about Daruj because he's very down to earth. He's connecting with people, and I think you guys both share that attribute: being connected to the community, being able to listen and give back, which is a great trait. Because as a mentor or a sponsor, you really need to bring your experience back to that age."
Yep.
And say, okay, they think different, but it's okay because I'm here to help.
Yeah.
So you're at Ken Kennedy Institute. It was a big step in your career, 18 years in the role. Between the Institute and the ION, what was best lessons learned from the experience that helped shaping and jump-starting the ION experience in terms of big tech and training talent?
Yeah, so I think that why did I leave a job at the Ken Kennedy Institute and choose to come to the ION and join that team? I've asked myself that many times, and and it comes down to a profound fascination and love for the city of Houston. I call this home. We love it and we enjoy it. And I felt like through the ION and through the investment by the Rice Management Company, which is building out the district here in the ION, this is an opportunity to help sort of shine the spotlight on Houston in a way that doesn't mean we need to be a tourist destination. We are a technology hub. ION will be there, but we Houston, we are advanced technology in energy, in healthcare, in space, in transportation. We're the fourth largest city in the U.S. We're the most diverse city. This is all the ingredients you need to do to be a successful destination for technology. We just didn't have the vibrancy and sort of the cachet, if you will, of Silicon Valley and Atlanta and Austin and other places. I saw the ION as the unique opportunity to kind of make that happen. And we were sort of at this transition point where also Houston needed to reinvent itself in terms of energy transition and growing opportunities in the healthcare space and AI and digital health. So there was a unique time, and I said, I really think that we are not showing ourselves in the best way to the people that could be here and be part of that. And part of that I saw a student kind of just leaving Rice, going other places, not thinking there was an opportunity to work in an attractive career in Houston. And I said, we got to do something about that. So to me, it was all about stepping into something where I could help transform Houston into something else. What's the journey of Houston that could make it attractive, where others could see it as much as I see it, or my wife sees it, or you see it that have lived there for a while. We love Houston for what it is and the opportunities it has to offer. And I wanted to be part of that, and I think ION offered all the ingredients to that.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to jump from 18 years, and I could have retired from that position to go into something that was maybe somewhat uncertain.
This is, I believe, what Houston was missing, the ION.
Yeah.
I was at an event at Greentown Labs recently,
Yeah.
and President of Chevron Ventures, Brad, talked about we don't need to be San Francisco or Boston or Atlanta or Denver. Houston has its own strong workforce that has technology background, and we need to do our own style of entrepreneurship. Walking through the corridor of the ION, seeing the ION district, it's very evident you guys are doing a great job. I usually attended in the first floor. I've never been in the second floor, and I just knew there was a Microsoft whole floor there. There was a lot of spaces where different companies was walking around. What you guys are doing is amazing. This is a good transition to my next question, which is, while the ION was being developed, you thought you could be part of this vision to make big things that Houston usually did, like putting a man on the moon, being the energy capital of the world. And the inauguration of the new Rice University president last month, he stated that the ION district, who is just taking shape, will be a hub for innovators, which will transform Houston. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know what the ION is, or the ION district is, could you give us a glimpse of the vision of the ION district?
Yeah. Well, it's a tall order. How much time do we
have? We have
We're running
about,
out of time, I think.
Yes, 10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah, so we'll try to
just in a
we'll
summary.
try to get the cliff notes in here. But to some degree, ION is what you help it become.
Okay.
About the future of technology. So I think that's one thing. We are a mixed-use district. So let me talk at the district level. The district, because there's 16 acres or 12 city blocks here that makes up the Ion district. And Greentown Lab is part of the Ion district, as is Ion. So that actually, when we say Greentown Labs, we're talking about a tenant in the district.
Okay.
So that's another thing that sometimes is missed on the community. But we are here to build a destination. What does a destination mean? It's a place that people will come and work, come and live, come and do their daily chore, and engage with it. We don't have places like that in Houston today. We don't have places where the live, work, play kind of function at a high level, where technology is at the center of what maybe your workforce is. And I think we have unique opportunities to build that here, because we're building something from scratch. While this building is renovated and the Greentown build is renovated, the remainder dozen buildings that will come up here are new buildings built for purpose for what we are going to accomplish here. A walkable, bikeable, people-friendly environment where the outdoor-indoor anchors into each other, where buildings are accessible, where parking is put to the side, the people are in the center. So when you talked about earlier, me greeting people coming in and out of the building and everybody are equal, that is the culture we're leading with.
Yeah.
Now, it is mixed use, so this building in and of itself is for, we often say that this building is a layer cake. And what do I mean by that? Well, the lower level, which is a below grade floor, and the main floor has great food and beverages, and there's a couple of restaurants coming very soon, so stay tuned for that. 2 are open, so if you haven't tried out, Common Bond at the Ion or Second Draft, you absolutely should, but soon we will have Limbar and late August also. And so that's for the plug for the food and beverage in the building. And they're anchoring into the plaza, the great outdoor in front of the building. But then as you come into the building, you're drawn into that center core there, which has a lot of events and pitch competition, demo days, classes for entrepreneurs and innovators. We have a prototyping lab for the ones that want to make physical devices. We have an investor studio for VCs to book their spaces and actually take meetings with startups and other investors to kind of grow that ecosystem of investment that's going to go in Houston. And then, so this is an open floor. We invite the community to come and actually work from here. We're not charging you a membership here. We'd love to get in touch with you so we can help inform you about what else is going on there, because we have a rich calendar of event, every month. Then as you get up to the second floor, the floor we're at now, and that's where we have flexible office and co-working. Here you can rent from month to month. You can be an entrepreneur, you could be a nonprofit, you could be a consultancy, and we have them all here, including corporates in a flexible office sort of environment, with everything from a single desk, shared desk, to a private desk, to a small office, to a larger office suite. And then as you move higher up in the building, you're more a traditional corporate tenant, if you will, and that's where you have Era Partners, you have Chevron, you have Cognite, you have OpenStax, a spin out from Rice University, and sort of free textbooks online, and then you get to the fifth floor where you have Microsoft taking almost a little bit a little bit 60% of the floor actually. So you have all of these things, and the goal of this light column or this light well that's in the middle of the building is all about the energy of the total ecosystem. So our job is to meet the founders, entrepreneurs, small businesses at the lower level, help them grow and be successful, and somehow move up in this hierarchy of things.
Yeah.
And we will constantly keep filling them, and they grow up, and they grow into maybe the larger district or take places, other places. So we want to be a feeder of technology and entrepreneurs and innovators across the border. So that's and by the way, Greentown is doing the same thing, but they're very focused on clean tech, green energy, and sustainability. So we are sort of doing everything. They're very focused on their startups and entrepreneurs that they're focusing on. We have multiple corporate tenants. They're more focusing on sort of the entrepreneurs only.
Just to make this idea simple, I read a book recently called Deep Work. And they talk about how when you focus on an area, your brain develop melanin around the nerves that makes the messages being back and forth between certain parts of the body. And I feel like the Ion District is that narrow system that connects everything in the city. And this brings me to my last question before the identity capital question, which is, where does the Ion fit within Houston? entrepreneurship ecosystem and how it interacts with the Houston Exponential, Team CX, Station Houston, Greentown Labs, TXRX, angel investor VCs, entrepreneurs, startups, and companies, knowing that it is placed between Rice University, one of the best universities in the southern U.S., between Texas Medical Center, the BC Bioscience Research Center. How does the whole system interact and where you guys fit in?
Well, I mean, so it's an important thing to keep in mind that Houston, we're 7.5 million people in the larger, greater metropolis. We have an incredible sprawl. There's not one place that's going to solve Houston's future. You know that. First of all, let's just make that clear. You know, so we need all all hands on deck to support that. Yes. That means that there are going to be other entities like the Canon or Mass Challenge or Houston Exponentials and other organizations needing to grow up and actually take some of that and create opportunities in proximity to where people are living in high density. Yeah. You know. The Ion and the Ion District, you know, is very much focused on this area that is sort of between the Central Business District downtown and the Texas Medical Center. We're on that red line that creates the opportunity there. We feel like we have a unique position in that ecosystem in that we are so centrally located. And if you couple that up against sort of the repopulation and sort of the flow of people moving back into the urban setting across the U.S., not unique to Houston, by the way, where there's a tendency to move from the suburbs now into the denser, you know, you start seeing that this is a good place to be and it has opportunities for it. You also see a great movement toward building sort of placemaking and building places that have the amenities and attribute for you to actually have your life there. You live there, you work there, you play there. You don't necessarily need a car. You may even do mass transit if you need to do. You may actually just Uber or Lyft with it. But largely, you're able to do almost everything you need to. So I think Ion is really the hybrid of all of that and bringing all of that together to really do that. And so we work with most of the other institutions that you mentioned. We friendly compete with them, and I think some collaboration and competition is healthy.
Healthy, absolutely.
It's healthy, and because we all don't know all the answers, so that means that when sometimes we collaborate, we get inspired by others, and so I think that's what what we're looking at here. So we see everybody as friends, and we see everybody as competitors, and there's nothing wrong by either one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The identity capital question. So from your career, what is the one thing you learned by doing an experience that you cannot read in books you would tell your younger self?
Well, for me, I've always said, and I'm not sure if I'm able to live it, but for me, I always don't want to make it about me. It makes me uncomfortable sitting here talking about me because I want to be able to stand back and see both the team, the organization, the projects you work on be the success. That's ultimately what we need to, because I'm just one person that can be here. If I can be somebody that inspires or help others be successful, that's the biggest thing. So it's really about trying to make sure it's not about me. You know, that means that you have to park the ego somewhere and allow it to be about the people you're helping.
So it makes you feel good that the whole team is raising and giving to society.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Great. Jan, tusen tack.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing such a great story.
Yeah.
For our audience, this is Identity Capital. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.